The history of the Holy Land has been recorded for over 3,000 years. So too has its natural history. Several books of the Bible contain detailed records of the animals that lived in Israel when the Old Testament was being written. There are other records, especially here at the old copper workings at Timnah, known as King Solomon's Mines. 3,500 years ago, Midianite miners carved animals on the rock walls. The drawings are a lively catalogue of the animals that were common in the southern deserts at the time. The white oryx was one, long since extinct as a wild animal in Israel. Another was the ostrich. The ibex was well known to the Midianites. They may have known the addax too, another large desert antelope. In the 8th century, artists made mosaics depicting fallow deer, which have since died out, and wild boar, which are still common in Israel. The boar have been joined on the mountains by gazelles, reintroduced to the Golan Heights after having been wiped out by hunters half a century or more earlier. Nighttime reveals that a number of other species survived the carnage of those days. There are still packs of wild wolves in Israel, especially in the Negev Desert in the south. And striped hyenas, though there may be no more than 120 in the whole country. Their prey is often gazelles, especially the Dorcas gazelle, another desert species which has flourished since it was protected by law. But too many animals have gone for good. In 1960, a group of enthusiasts had one of those ideas which illustrates the fine line between genius and madness. They decided to reintroduce into Israel all the animals mentioned in the Bible. They called their harebrained scheme Haibar, which means wildlife. It was to be like a new ark. An old but treasured home movie records the arrival of the first animals in the breeding enclosures at Yotvatah in the Arava Valley in 1968. The first to arrive were onagers, Asiatic wild asses, described by Jeremiah as well used to the wilderness. Next, they released scimitar-horned oryx in order to learn more about their close relative, the white oryx. The animals were released into a large enclosure where they could be fed and watched until their population was big enough to be released into the wild. White oryx finally arrived in 1978. The onagers bred successfully enough for some of them to be released into the desert, while others were kept in a reserve population at Yotvatah. It will soon be time to release more into the desert to join the pioneers. The ostriches mentioned in the Bible disappeared in the 1920s or 30s. These are from the Danakil Desert in Ethiopia, their nearest surviving relatives. Along with the onagers, Somali wild asses, oryx and addax, they roam and breed on the broad plains of the Arava Valley. The Haibar Reserve earns its keep by attracting visitors from cities to the north, as well as from Eilat, an international holiday resort at the top of the Red Sea, where the Queen of Sheba landed. The other attraction at Haibar Arava is the Predator Center, where the more ferocious members of the biblical fauna are being bred and studied. Caracals were thought to be extinct until a few individuals were discovered in 1958 in the Negev Desert near here. They turned out to be quite common. So too are wolves, which are also being closely studied at the Predator Center. Playing with the wolves is one of Haibar's leopards. About 30 live wild in the Judean desert above the shores of the Red Sea. They belong to a very rare subspecies which repays close study. There is no plan to release large predators into inhabited parts of the country. However, the animals that were once their prey will be reintroduced. Above the city of Haifa, on the forested slopes of Mount Carmel, a northern branch of the Haibar organization has started on the long road to re-establishing the wild sheep, deer, and wild goats which once lived in these hills. Above them, in the protected forest, there is another rare species which has survived against the odds after centuries of persecution. This is one of the last known nests of the Israeli sparrowhawk. Here, in the reserve, it has a good chance of successfully rearing its young. The woods are not ideal for all the introduced animals. Persian wild sheep, brought from Iran, breed freely in the enclosures. But the soft ground under the trees is very different from the rocky hills that are their natural home. Their hooves grow too well without the abrasion of rocks. From time to time, the sheep have to be caught and given a pedicure. Staff of the Nature Reserves Authority have a lot of experience in catching these nervous and athletic animals, but it never gets any easier. The general rule is to leave the animals alone so that they retain their wildness, ready for release into the rocky hills when the time comes. But the state of the sheep's hooves was such that they had to be caught. One by one, the staff carry them to a quiet place where they can be treated. The scientists take the chance to check their state of health. In spite of their overgrown hooves, sheep are all in very good condition. Plainly, returning to the native home of their species has done them no harm. The pedicure over, the slightly flustered sheep is released to regain its composure before being sent back to join its fellows. The ear tag marks it as not needing to be caught in the next drive. Down in the desert, Dawn finds the Yotvata animals at the height of the breeding season. Addax males fence gingerly with their fearsome horns. It seems remarkable that there aren't more serious injuries. The sparring is ritualized, a trial of strength rather than an out-and-out fight. The ostrich inflates its crop to emphasize the pink neck of the North African subspecies. White Oryx fence more energetically than addax, apparently narrowly escaping disaster. Suddenly, a female Oryx canters into view. A ragged afterbirth, still not completely ejected, shows that she's given birth within the last few minutes. The hunt is on to find the calf. The best way to find it is to watch the mother. She soon returns to the calf, lying motionless where she left it. From 8 animals brought from America in 1978, the Yotfatah herd has grown to over 50. The only wild herd in the world is in Oman, where they were reintroduced after being bred back from near extinction in one of the most famous conservation rescue exercises. The eventual aim of High Bar is to release part of this herd into the open desert. As soon as she's given birth, the female Oryx is ready to mate again. Amorous males gather, attracted by her scent. The calf is at risk in the tense atmosphere surrounding its mother. Males have been known to kill calves at a time like this, but the calf instinctively knows the best way to escape their horns is to lie flat. Its mother is torn between 2 conflicting urges, to mate or to protect her existing calf. For the time being, the calf takes precedence. A lone male waits patiently for the balance to shift in favor of mating. Meanwhile, the ostriches have a brood to rear. The last known individual of the Middle Eastern ostrich was washed away in a flood in southern Jordan in 1966, though the species was practically extinct 30 years before that. These, from the Ethiopian subspecies, come from a desert which is very similar to the Negev, which will eventually become their new home. An Oryx calf knows from birth that milk is to be found close to an adult leg. From that beginning, it has to learn the finer details. A male is not productive at either end. When it's challenged by another, it can be clumsy too. Mother is the best guide, and eventually she will manage to show the youngster how to feed. At last, the baby Oryx makes the vital connection, and all would seem to be well. But the males are still interested in mating with its mother. This leads to a dangerous situation which would not arise in the wild. There, species keep separate except briefly at places like waterholes. Here, they're drawn together for long periods at feeding points, and normal relations can become confused with consequent danger to the young ones. With mother's attention distracted by mating, the baby Oryx is left briefly to its own devices. It takes the chance to explore this strange new world. A forest of interesting legs a little way away looks worth investigating. The infant has no way of knowing the dangers of mingling with another species. The addax are curious, but to them, as to all prey animals, anything strange is dangerous. The oryx reacts as it does to all danger, until the threat passes. It's learning fast. Not even its own species is to be trusted, until it can find the one unthreatening pair of horns, those of its mother. Other mothers with growing calves are indifferent. Even its own mother seems to be engrossed in feeding rather than looking for her offspring. Finally, a reassuring touch shows that the calf is no longer alone. The herd of oryx has grown well, and it's now nearly ready for release. Some other animals have already gone. A group of onagers was set free in a huge natural enclosure called the Ramon Depression. High Bar have decided to add to their numbers from the stock at Yot Fatah. The earlier release of onagers into the Ramon was almost too successful. It took the rangers a very long time to find the animals again, though passers-by reported seeing them from time to time. These will be marked with indelible numbers so that they can be reported more accurately, even by strangers. An antidote is administered and another onager is ready for freedom. Job was asked, who has let the wild ass go free? Jeremiah noted its adaptation to the wilderness. The wilderness it now inhabits is the spectacular scenery of the Ramon Depression. Bones of wild asses have been found in archaeological digs, but nothing was heard of the species in Israel after those biblical references. It survived in Jordan until 1920, but then it died out. Now it has returned to Israel. Finding the onagers can be a problem. They seem to be able to disappear into the desert without trace. The herd stays together, though there are signs that a breakaway group is forming. This will represent success in the first completed reintroduction of the High Bar project. One animal is badly hurt with a broken foreleg, but it'll be left to itself to live or die. Once the animals are reintroduced, they are wild and beyond human intervention. The High Bar project received a severe setback in 1989. when fire devastated the forested slopes of Mount Carmel. The images on Israeli television shocked the country. Trapped in their enclosures, the animals had no escape. Volunteers joined the high bar staff in fighting the flames, but the damage was extensive. It will take many years to replace the work lost to the fire. And yet, even while the chainsaws were still clearing the debris, among the ashes of the catastrophe, the animals began to recover. The following spring, all the species being bred at Carmel produced a record number of young. The fallow deer, still scheduled to be the first to be released into the forest, showed little sign of the near disaster. Young males challenging the dominant stags are a symbol that the species will live on down the generations on its return to the home it last knew 1,000 years ago. And now, at last, the time is coming for the Oryx to be released. The animal, once familiar to the Midianites at King Solomon's mines, will soon be a feature of the deserts where it evolved millions of years ago.
אל תעלה על החבל. זהו, עמוד, יופי, עמוד, מצוין.
The writers of the Old Testament, the authors of Kings, Job, Jeremiah, and the Song of Solomon, little knew that they were leaving a record for the guidance of their descendants 3,000 years into the future.